First, both Dr. Tom Frazier and Tracy Masterson are both John Carroll grads. So they are a product of John Carroll's undergraduate curriculum. So Dr. Frazier, he got his bachelor's from John Carroll in 1997, and he holds a PhD in clinical psychology from Case Western. And he joined the Cleveland Clinic as a staff member in pediatrics in 2006. And then in 2013, he was named director of the Cleveland Clinic's Center for Autism. And then he was also hired in 2017 as the chief science officer for Autism Speaks. And he oversaw all of science and service programs before John Carroll recruited him away in January of 2020. And he is now a professor of psychology and one of our resident experts on this program. So Tom has been very active in a clinical practice, and then also generating research programs, both grant funded and some of his own creativity. And he's really focused on the evaluation and treatment of autism, ADHD, and related conditions that we will talk about today. He's well published. He has over 120 papers, scientific papers, excuse me, and he leads collaborations all over the world on this subject. So we are very happy to have Dr. Frazier back on campus, both as an alum and as one of our star scholars. And he joins Dr. Tracy Masterson. So Tracy is a tenured professor in psychology at John Carroll University, and she is also a licensed clinical psychologist, and she has a specialization in pediatric psychology. She has very specialized training working with individuals with developmental disabilities and ASD. She has a degree in clinical psychology from Kent State, and she has completed postdoc fellowship in pediatric behavioral health from the Cleveland Clinic Children's Hospital. She is currently on several boards on this topic, including Building Behavior's Autism Center. She's on that board. And she is a co-author of a book entitled Parties, Dorms, and Social Norms, a crash course in safe living for college students with autism. So with that introduction and with our enthusiasm for where this program can take John Carroll University and serve the community needs, I turn it over to Dr. Frazier and Dr. Masterson, and you will probably share your screen and some slides. So again, if you have questions, please type it in the chat because it'll be hard to see your hands raised. So thank you.
Thanks for that introduction, Doreen. I appreciate it. I know Tom's going to get us started off. I'll be our sort of MC on the PowerPoint.
Yeah, thanks, Doreen. Can everybody hear me okay? Shake your head, yeah? Okay, good. Thanks everybody for joining. Really appreciate it. Tracy and I are very excited about this. And obviously we have a commitment to John Carroll and to autism. So seeing the Center for Autism and Neurodevelopment become more and more of a reality is exciting to us. And we just want to walk you through over the next 20 or 30 minutes or so what we're thinking about in terms of the Center for Autism and Neurodevelopment, some of the pieces that we've been working on. And we'll start off, Tracy, if you don't mind just moving forward. We'll start off by just talking to you about why John Carroll and autism. So autism has obviously become much more in the public consciousness over the last 15 years. And it's hard for people to wrap their minds around this, but nearly 18% of children and adolescents in the United States are diagnosed with a developmental disability. And so we're talking about roughly 10 million children and adolescents that have a developmental disability in the United States. So it's really a huge number of individuals that need special services, special education, et cetera. And so the prevalence, unfortunately, is not going down either. We see this sort of explosion in prevalence in spite of our best efforts at intervention. So Tracy, if you can kick to the next slide. And while this need is growing, we're seeing an increase in the provider capacity, but that increase in provider capacity is just not even close to what we really need to have happen. In fact, the gap between the provider capacity and the actual need in the population is growing and it's getting larger each year. And so we really have this urgent need to start to develop a much stronger provider capacity to meet the need for people with autism and developmental disability. Next slide. And, you know, JCU is very uniquely positioned to play an important role here, both regionally and beyond. So why JCU? Well, our location itself is actually quite fortuitous. We are located in an area where all the major autism treatment programs and evaluation programs are within a fairly short distance from us. And we have this massive student interest, which has been growing everywhere, but it's really poignant at John Carroll. We see students all the time, and Tracy can talk to this about, we have students that come up to us because they have family members, maybe siblings with autism. Maybe they just happen to have an experience where they were able to interact with a person with autism or a developmental disability. And now they would like to build on that through their education and maybe ultimately through a vocation. So there's this really nice student interest, and we have some space on campus to be able to expand our programming, our training, our education, our services. So that's also a fortuitous opportunity for us. And then, you know, this is incredibly congruent with John Carroll University's mission. We have the opportunity to do better for people that have these needs. We know that the needs are substantial, and we know that our students want to be engaged and have the opportunity to be a part of this, that they're driven by that mission. And as a result, these two things, both the opportunity and the mission, really come together nicely. And then, you know, Tracy and I have spent the last 15 years or so building local connections to all of the major academic medical centers and the local treatment programs in the area, as well as national connections with organizations like Autism Speaks, where I was the previous chief science officer, the Simons Foundation, which has a strong interest in supporting research in autism, and the Autism Science Foundation, which has a similar interest. And in fact, I have two active grant-funded projects right now, one with Autism Speaks and one with the Simons Foundation. So there's real opportunity to not only build this program, but then to get outside investment in the program as well. Tracy? And then we have, you know, Tracy has done an unbelievable job here, and she can talk more about this if folks are interested, but of building internship sites for our undergraduate students. And these relationships are incredibly strong relationships. It's not just that we can list these sites, it's actually that Tracy has real relationships with these sites, and we've had undergraduate students be involved in these sites in one way or another, either through an internship or through some kind of experience. So this is, again, really, we can leverage this as we build our Center for Autism and Neurodevelopment opportunities.
And I do want to add something here. You know, there's more than this list, and I can say more than beyond anecdotally how many of these organizations have been emailing us, knowing that our students are really strong and wanting students there. But also these relationships have really developed into a strong fiscal investment in what we may do with the BCBA program or some master's programs. So I literally asked, as we were planning this, trying to do some budgeting of some of our ideas, I asked probably the top 3 or 4 programs that I work with in terms of how much would it cost to do supervision for our students. And they all said they're so amazing. They literally put it in writing that it would be free because it's such a mutually beneficial thing. And that doesn't happen. If students have to get supervision outside, they're paying, you know, upwards of maybe $150, $150 a month. So to be able to offer this as a consequence of some of these relationships is really profound. And the other thing that this does in a, you know, let's say there's a family coming to visit John Carroll. I have usually a cohort of about 20 to 30 students doing these internships every semester. And they are paid nearly $20 an hour to do this and also get academic credit. So it's really, you know, an internship that's extremely beneficial and powerful because they get that opportunity, they're getting academic credit, and then it's very helpful and positive, not only for psych majors, but even for pre-med majors, other things. So it's been absolutely extremely fruitful endeavor. So I can talk more about that when we talk about the BCBA program.
So we want to get to the meat of this now. I mean, the bottom line is we're excited for you to hear us talk today because we really have three objectives in front of us. We want to begin a master's program with a BCBA certification, and we'll talk more about what BCBA stands for and why it's so important. We would like to start, and we've already taken some initial steps to start a student success program for autism and related conditions. And then I have built and continue to build a translational research program in neurodevelopmental biomarkers. And Tracy also has students doing research with her as well. And we want to be able to expand those research opportunities, not only for students, but because the kind of research we do actually has really direct clinical implications and can really advance our ability to evaluate and assess individuals with autism and related developmental disabilities. And the key thing about these objectives is, yes, these are separate objectives, but they all work together in the sense that as we build one of these, it really helps us to be even more successful in the other area. And we'll talk about that along the way. Go ahead, Tracy. Go ahead, Tracy, if you want to talk about the BCBA program.
Sure. And I recognize, that there is a lot of alphabet soup in this, and that's, sort of the nature of the beast. And I will try my best to help translate and explain. So just to, again, more alphabet soup. So the BCBA stands for, if you learn nothing else, right, learn this, Board Certified Behavior Analyst. But it's really using the principles of learning and behavior in a very methodical way to work with a variety of behavioral issues. So while obviously Tom and I, based on our passions and our research and our clinical interests, do a lot with autism, I want to underscore that this has implications and has applications to many other areas, including business, addiction, just general health. The list literally goes on. Any behavior that you engage in can be applied to this, weight loss, things like that. So the BCBA is what is truly the really only evidence-based intervention used in autism. And so it's, again, applying behavioral interventions to improving the lives, quality of life, skill sets, and so forth towards individuals who need those improvements. And, we have, again, just in terms of location, there's really only a few regional programs we had done, some investigations on this. And one thing that would be very different about our program, obviously we want to be unique in our program, but I think the internship and the requirement, in addition to just academic requirements of the BCBA program, absolutely there are required 1,500 hours of direct clinical placements that you need to do. And so a lot of programs will only offer just the academic component and require these students to find, some random place to do their practical requirements. And so we have this list already in a variety of settings. I have some settings that are more traditional academic settings, some that are obviously very much, autism based. So we already have 6 internship sites committed for a BCBA. We have these organizations and centers are desperate for more. And one thing that's also beautiful about the BCBA program is that it builds on things. So again, more alphabet soup, but it begins with something called the registered behavioral technician. Now, you don't need to start that way, but freshmen can get this qualification and get paid good money to do that. It can build, and then there's a BCABA that requires only an undergraduate amount of education plus the supervised, clinical interventions. Again, making more money, being able to supervise RBTs, that's something that undergrads could do. So it really builds from like almost an internship-esque thing to an undergrad major that has a lot of potential for good money into a master's program, and to keep students here who are already here to stay longer, which we've seen done very effectively with our counseling program, where they're already here, they sort of love John Carroll, want to stay, and to give them another avenue. This also dovetails beautifully, like I said, with a business or an MBA program, with education in terms of being an intervention specialist, or with counseling. It's a really beautiful marriage. So there's lots of sort of cross collaboration too, where I believe this could be a really fruitful kind of connection. Tom actually talks about the BCBA as sort of like what do you call it? Like a nursing, a mental health, like but like a nursing version of mental health sort of. And I think that's very true. They're really the frontline workers working with all kinds of different populations. And it's a billable service, it's a licensable service, and it's very highly employable. So I'll show you some stats going forward. But we really do have a great market. And like I've said, I've been sort of, filling this. I have this population of students who are just super interested in autism because of all the classes and internships I've done. So at the programs, the investment is relatively small with respect to how quickly we expect to break even. So, again, you can sort of get a sense, but pretty quickly by the third year, by our second cohort, this is a program that will make good money and again, give students really good employability outcomes with a great ability to make money and actually have a lot of autonomy in their jobs. This is a job that is, a lot of BCBAs are not as much doing as much front line care. There's a lot of room for owning your own business as a BCBA, for being an administrator. There's a lot of growth within the field too, that I think is really positive to encourage. But these are sort of our gross numbers for now.
I'll just jump in really quick, Tracy, and just say, not only is the BCBA program profitable for the university, but there's not many certifications that you can get through a master's program that lead to directly to licensure in the state and have billing codes available to you. And so it's not unusual for a BCBA to be certified, start a business, and then be successful in growing their business within the first 2 years. And I was just on a phone call earlier today with a large ABA company, and they've grown just over the last, and they have sites all around the country, but they have sites in Cleveland and Akron and Toledo as well. And they've hired 200 new staff just in the last 12 months. So there's a tremendous opportunity, whether you're starting your own business or joining a business. This is a major growth area of the world and mental health in particular.
Yeah, for sure. And even to have those sort of international capabilities and to be a leader in the field is really important. So just a sort of brief snapshot, but again, this has been growing for, the past decade, especially that we've seen. I mean, and these students are, again, getting jobs, and the growth is not expected to stop. And when you look worldwide, again, you're going to want to do things that have great evidence base. The core of ABA and the BCBA is evidence based. I mean, it works. We know that it works. It's measurable. The outcomes are attainable. And so it's utilized. And again, insurance providers see that the interventions work, and therefore it's one of those things that's really growing. And just in general, mental health is growing tremendously. So onto this slide. I mean, some reasons for mental health growth, it's very challenging, because obviously it's been a really hard time with COVID and other things. But this projection was even prior to COVID, where, the need for mental health professionals is growing. The requirement for, post-secondary education for that is growing. And you can see it's growing at a much quicker rate than a lot of other fields when you compare it to other competitive fields. So, and in particular, autism and behavioral specialists are very high. And just sort of fitting with what Tom just said with his meeting today, I mean, it's the same idea. There's so many students who have needs and centers that are growing and trying to meet the needs of these, the families and the individuals who have their needs. So it's a really lucrative, from this perspective too, the last thing we'd want to do is invest and put all this time and effort into something that's not going to, contribute to society, that's not going to give our students jobs, and in psychology, sometimes we get a rap of, sort of, what can you do with a psych, major? And this is, again, at the level of even an undergrad, there's a lot you can do at the BCABA level. This is a job with an undergrad degree. And again, a lot of students are going to want to go to the BCBA at master's level, but it's nice to know that there's gradations as well. And so, this is a sort of a separate thing. So I don't know if we want to stop for questions or just keep going, but that's sort of the idea of our sort of graduate education program in psychology, right? The BCBA program again, it's huge. We have so many vested partners around. We have amazing clinicians that I work with who are dying to even come and teach here. They are so passionate about what they do. But then we've also sort of been working on, in our spare time that Tom and I don't have much of, is also sort of recognizing, consistent with John Carroll's mission, is, look, we want to also service our student population that, our students with autism, with learning exceptionalities. It's not only autism, but I think this is going to be probably a big chunk of this. And I think John Carroll already gets a reputation because of all the things our students do, that we're a pretty autism friendly place. We do partnerships. We have, this is a funny little anecdote, but I have a small grant that I have to do peer mentorship activities with John Carroll. And we have the students with autism from Monarch come to John Carroll in our cafeteria, when COVID's not happening, twice a month. And they partner and we do all kinds of fun activities. And it's a very autism centric place, I would say, here. So we, again, between the administration, student services, our department, we've been kind of wrapping our heads around how do we help students that are here as students. So that's sort of what our next part of this process is. So yeah, my job, this is my perfect little book, right? I work and live in college. I do work with individuals with autism, and it's really hard to navigate. And so, I wrote this book before I thought about having this program, but so why this program? Why are we doing this? So there is a huge need. These students are extremely smart, talented, motivated, certainly with the right supports can do well, and not only improve their quality of life, but improve like the economic forecast for our country as well by including them in the workforce. And I think you might be surprised, but students on the spectrum compared with other developmental disabilities are among the least effectively employed. They're either underemployed or unemployed at very high rates. So really giving them that quality education, in addition to, as part of this program, would be a lot of career mentoring and career advising as well. But about 44% of individuals with ASD will receive some post-secondary education. And why can't that be at John Carroll? And we want to differentiate JCU. We also know that, groupthink is not a positive thing, and adding different, they found, I work a lot with the Cuyahoga County Board of Developmental Disabilities. And one of their main jobs with my contact, Jared Daly, who I love at the county board, is to help educate businesses, around Cleveland anyway, to invest in hiring individuals with disabilities. And he's like, and he's right. It's not doing some kind of charity case. This actually helps promote outcomes with respect to business profits, with respect to productivity, with respect to employers feeling connected to their place of business. And I think a similar finding will happen when we have more students here that have learning differences and exceptionality. So we certainly do want to add to and diversify the undergraduate student body. And we have expertise here. We have a great disability services office. We have Tom and I, we have education, our Department of Education. We have a lot of amazing professionals that have this expertise. So why not use it and bring it to John Carroll, but also using our vocational transitioning. So we are lucky to have the Center for Service and Social Action. So I've had students in the past from John Carroll that have autism, and they have benefited greatly from what I call them as mini internships of doing service every semester. So they provide the transportation. It's a small sort of weekly opportunity to work in different sort of service related capacities that are experienced with getting letters of, mentors and individuals to write letters of recommendation for you, or amazing things to write on your resume. So we have a lot of that stuff in place already that would flow really well for a program like this. So, what this would be, again, it's hard to sort of, we talked about this in different meetings we have. How does the BCBA program link to this? And I think they could sort of operate independent of one another, but like many good things, I think together they'd be very synergistic. So having this crop of students in a graduate program would really add to, that would give them more supervision wise and clinical opportunities, but also that would really be helpful to the students at John Carroll that identify as being on the autism spectrum, because there'd be a host of people to maybe assist with interventions, to facilitate some of these activities at a fairly reasonable cost also. So there's opportunities that we would provide for peer mentoring, which is huge. Just having, the biggest issue, if you don't know, with autism, the core issue is social interaction and social challenges, social cognition. Our John Carroll students are professionals at that. They know every social nuance. They're amazing mentors to these students. And they're also, I'm a little biased since I went here and I teach here, but they're an amazingly lovely group of students. There's something very specific, and I don't want to minimize that, about John Carroll and about the students I have. I mean, I say this multiple times a day when I teach, I'm like, what did your parents do? You guys are amazing students. But I also think there's something in the John Carroll, curriculum and everything else that just makes them amazingly open, wonderful students and kind students. We also want to support these students, with autism and other needs with more intensive academic advising, giving them a lot of supports for the, again, many of them are going to be exceptionally intelligent, but may have some trouble applying knowledge, or maybe if they're in let's say a literature class, maybe intuiting what the character might be thinking because they have some challenges with social skills, things like that. Some daily supports, daily living supports. Ideally, I mean, not that we would require it for the program, but I think dorm living and being on campus would be advantageous. Parents, with a lot of the families I work with, a huge concern of parents of children with autism is autonomy, independence, living alone, getting a job, all those quality of life issues. So that's another thing that we could really support here, to give them those opportunities, and certainly some social growth opportunities. So a lot of synergistic components for the BCBA to sort of lend itself to student success program, and vice versa. Both students benefiting from that. So with respect to this, now we're trying to be, really thoughtful, competitive with what we would offer. So how this would work, the students would, get in on their own merits. They would pay tuition or whatever, they would be charged with tuition. But for these services, again, and there's more than I had sort of delineated there, it would be around $4,500 a year on top of that. And that's really competitive with other programs and what they do as part of that. But this is a program that would eventually add quite a bit when you think about, some parents, if we don't have this, or some students wouldn't come here without maybe knowing that they might need a little bit more support. And so it's really going to open up sort of this new demographic of students, ideally. Based on conversations with Doreen and admissions, having just a student, having more students at John Carroll really does enhance financially what we're trying to do here. So it would make money over time with a pretty conservative estimate of students, so while we're not making a huge amount of money, again, our job is not to take advantage of students and have them pay exorbitant amounts of money. I think actually the $4,500 per year is really kind of breaking even, but it's really adding more students to the class. Again, adding something different to the culture of John Carroll, which I think is positive. The other thing that I think would come with this, in my view and my vision, would be also educating, faculty and staff, and really providing those types of things too, to make it a very neurodiverse place, which I think is very valuable. And again, consistent with our mission. But that's sort of some of the numbers there, where in a couple years, we're making, this could also be a positive, fiscal investment as well. So, and I'll let Tom.
Let me jump in too, Tracy. Back to the BCBA program, just to let folks know.
Yeah.
By the fourth cohort, we're expecting to have a minimum of 30 students. Right. So the same thing that Tracy just mentioned for the autism undergraduate student support program, the BCBA program adds census to the university, and because it's adding census, adds a nice revenue stream in that way. And by the fourth cohort or the fifth year, we start to see really positive profit loss for the university. So I just wanted to add that in.
All right, that's my little transition slide. I'll move on.
The thing about it is, Tracy highlighted this nicely, which is the Autism Student Support Program and the BCBA program are very synergistic with one another. The BCBA students will get the opportunity to earn hours by supporting autism students and students with related disabilities in the undergraduate program. And of course, the undergraduate program benefits by having those available therapists to help out. Our research program is separate in the sense that it's not a direct education or intervention opportunity, but we have so many students that want to participate in our research program. And we have lots of opportunities along the way to help students gain new skills. And so that's kind of what I'm going to emphasize here. But before I get into all that, I just want to give you a sense of what we're trying to accomplish in our research program. So autism and neurodevelopmental disabilities have tremendous needs in terms of future innovation and development. I mean, we know that we don't capture kids early enough in life. We don't detect autism or whatever other neurodevelopmental problems they have. We don't catch those early enough. Even when we do catch them early, we don't always get people into treatment appropriately. Sometimes the treatment is not tailored appropriately to their particular set of strengths and weaknesses. And we don't do a very good job of monitoring their progress through treatment and then eventually their outcome so we can get them to the next thing that they need to do, whether that's mainstream school or special education supports, or if it's in an adolescent or early adult, vocational training or post-secondary education. So there's so much innovation we need to do here. And one of the things we need to innovate on is having biomarkers. Biomarkers are objective, biologically based or biologically associated measurements that allow us to capture important features of autism and developmental disabilities that we can then use to do specific things or use cases. So what I've been doing over the last 5 to 6 years is leveraging technologies to build biomarkers. And one of the technologies we started with was gaze tracking, but we started with this about actually really 7 to 8 years now. But one of the things we noticed along the way was that we didn't need to use these really expensive research grade eye trackers. We could actually just use a webcam. And now, with the pandemic, if there's anything good that happened with the pandemic, it would be that a lot of people have webcams now. So we can use the webcam to actually capture data from families and from patients. And so we know that we have to do a better job here. We know that if we detect kids late, they're going to have poor outcomes. We also know that autism tends to be, because of the disability that travels with autism, has a very large cost burden on the system. So we see levels of $250 billion a year plus in the US system. Much of that is in adulthood, but we got to plan for adulthood. We have to prepare for adulthood in early childhood and throughout the educational process. So we've been building a tool that shows kids things on a screen. We measure their gaze and their facial expressions to those things. And then we use artificial intelligence and machine learning to actually score those measurements to develop algorithms that have utility, that have use cases. And so, Tracy, if you skip to the next slide. And by doing this, we create biomarkers or translational biomarkers. Translational is just a fancy word to say we're trying to take basic research and then identify technologies that capture really important data, use algorithms on those technologies and the data that they capture to come up with specific uses, whether it be screening or diagnosis or figuring out how this child's going to do over time, what's their trajectory, what's their prognosis, how do we tailor their intervention, and then how do we monitor progress for them. And so our research program about creating translational biomarkers isn't nearly as fancy as it sounds. It's actually just figuring out ways to improve clinical practice by using technology. Go ahead and click the next slide. And we can involve students doing this. And by involving students in the process, we're teaching them next generation skills, right? These are the skills that Tracy and I didn't get a whole lot of training on when we were at John Carroll University. And we'd like to be able to give this to the next generation of students, because these are the kinds of skills they're going to need, whether it be learning about online assessment, because online assessment has really just exploded over the last 5 years, and the pandemic has only exacerbated that. How to use machine learning and artificial intelligence. I mean, let's be honest, the future of a lot of different areas, from marketing to mental health to medical health, is in artificial intelligence and machine learning. And we want to be able to teach students how to use that tool. And then also, a skill that we need to teach people is, how do we translate basic research into things that are practically useful for people? And so by being involved in our research program, we can show undergraduate students, yeah, research is fun, it's cool, it's interesting, there's technology, that's all great, but ultimately it doesn't really matter if it doesn't translate to practice. And so we have to translate these things into making a difference for patients. And one of the things that's cool about the biomarkers work that we're doing is it's not only doing that translation into practice, but it actually helps us to reduce disparities, right? We know that, for example, Black African-American families and Hispanic families, those children that have autism are diagnosed later, they get into treatment later, they have worse outcomes. And so if we have an objective measure, we can actually reduce those disparities or maybe even eliminate them. And the biomarkers we're talking about are things that we know are scalable, right? Everybody has a webcam. They're repeatable, meaning because you can do them at home, we can collect this data today, the next day after that, right? And we can continue to collect data without a huge burden on the parent or the child. They're inexpensive. Webcams don't cost a lot. Most times people have access to them. When they don't have access to them, we can send them one for $20. And they're fairly easy to use. And in fact, we build software to make this very, very easy for families to use. Go ahead into the next slide. So what we're doing is we're building a technology platform that has multiple applications. Digital screening, diagnosis, prediction, monitoring. We can do all of this in a very short period of time. We have to do it in a short period of time because ultimately children with autism aren't going to pay attention for a long time, usually, especially young children with autism. So we want to be able to get these things done quickly. We know that by building the platform, we're actually, not only are we building biomarkers, but we're facilitating future research, because other researchers can use that platform to do research. And then we're also maximizing child development because we're identifying autism early, and then we're helping to identify the right interventions for the right people at the right time. Go ahead to the next slide. And I'm just giving everybody an example just to make it a little more concrete for you about what we're doing here. So in our technology platform, we show people stimuli, visual auditory stimuli. And this is an example of one of our social attention stimuli, because we show two faces. Each face is showing a facial expression. And we ask the person who's looking at the stimulus, look at the happy face. And then the system that we've built, the technology platform, measures gaze. And so the heat map you see are a bunch of kids who are looking at the happy face right now. And at the same time it's doing that, it's also tracking their facial expressions, because most of us engage in something called social mimicry, which is whenever we see a happy face or even an angry face, we'll mimic that face naturally. But people with autism don't do as much mimicry. And so by tracking facial expressions and automatically coding them, we get a sense for whether or not that person has autism. And if they do have autism, is the intervention that they're experiencing helping them to be more responsive to social stimuli? So go ahead, Tracy, and take it to the next slide. So the big picture here, and Tracy, please jump in, is that we think by developing a VBBA program, by having an autism student support program, and by developing our translational biomarkers research program, that we're really taking John Carroll to the next level around autism and developmental disabilities, that we're already regionally a very well-respected group in terms of what we're doing, but we can take this beyond that to national and international. I have collaborations all around the world. Tracy has collaborations as well. And we have an opportunity to really leverage those collaborations and make John Carroll a very special place in terms of of autism and developmental disabilities. We can attract students from far away to come here and to learn these kinds of things, to be part of these kinds of programs, to get the kinds of supports that we're talking about.
Yeah, I would echo, I think too, having this sort of holistic piece of the puzzle is really helpful. So the research is really important. I also wanted to, one thing I didn't say, that sometimes I think goes without saying, but I need to say, part of some of the clinical programs as well, we would be doing research and programmatic outcomes with those things. And, research would be sort of a collaborative part of this whole thing. And it really does aid a lot to gain, national respect as a university. That research component is not just a minor part of this puzzle. And I think, again, what can happen too, having, BCBAs and more students, that could grow into having like clinics here and doing more interventions here. And also, again, making more of a profit. I think there's lots of room for that, but also to do research. A lot of training clinics do research, and it's all very interconnected. And it's just come together beautifully. And to have Tom, I know Tom's not going to brag, but Tom is, in terms of research and autism, he's absolutely, I can't think of anyone who really matches what you're doing. And to have him at John Carroll, I just think we need to take advantage of that. It's a really challenging time in higher education. And I just think like the timing is right, and the environment is right to really take this to the next level. So I appreciate all of your attention and just your interest, because this is stuff Tom and I love and, sleep, eat, and dream. And, so thanks for caring enough to be here to listen to our passions.
Yeah, I think we'd love to take questions if people have questions or just comments or.
Yeah, hey, Tom, it's Rick Maroon.
So Tracy, can you not share your screen so we
Yes, I
can see everyone? That'll
Yes,
be
yes.
easier.
Thank you.
Thank
I was
you.
getting to that. Yeah, thanks.
Yep.
So first of all, I'm struck at, I think you said you graduated in '97. Is that when? Yeah. So should I tell him during or what? So like 77, it's
No, tell them.
200 years ago. But hey, look, I'm with a company called Fraser Healthcare. We do investments, and then in the vertical, right? Healthcare only. And, I can verify a lot of what you had to say, because we own one of the providers in the ABA space that serves autism in children, primarily 18 months to 5 years, right? And we have, 31, I think almost 35 facilities now, Wisconsin, Illinois, Minnesota, Washington. And the biggest problem we're having is getting BCBAs, right? We employ 450 just BCBAs, not including the rest of the technician spectrum, right? And it's a big problem for us. It's hard to find those folks. And so you guys are doing some really creative things. I'd love to hook you up with the CEO if you don't know him already. See if there's a way to collaborate there.
Yeah, I that's awesome. I just would mention that I've been talking to Magellan Health about our technology platform as well, because they have a large ABA practices. I've had some conversations with Cortica Care. So I'd love to talk to people about that, because we're trying to build things that are, really useful to the patients and to the clinicians, and can ultimately make treatment more efficient. So I would absolutely welcome that. That'd be fantastic.
Yeah, I'll make that happen.
Well, I appreciate you saying that too, because, we're in this field, and it's nice to know, even at a field that's not, in healthcare, but more of maybe the business side of it, that you're seeing this issue as well. So I appreciate you kind of highlighting that, because that's certainly what we see in our world all the time. But
Right. Oh, and the other thing I was going to mention is, I think Santa Clara University is already running a program for students, that have autism. So you might want to, hook up with them to see how successful they've been. And I know Doreen Bob Niehoff is certainly, and could make those introductions if we need to.
Yeah, one of the things we didn't talk about, Rick, that'd be great. And there's a number of these programs around the country. One of the things that we are excited about is, each of these programs does one aspect of this well, but generally don't do all of it well. And I've had a sort of a national view of this because of my prior work. And so one of the things we want to do is just take best practices from these different places put them all into one location. So, you know, some places will do really well with a STEM student, with an autistic STEM student, but not so well with a humanities student. And I'm only using that as one example. I mean, there's many different ways. Some programs do better job with supporting daily living skills. Other programs have no support for daily living skills, right? So what we want to do is actually provide the full range of supports here, because, you know, doing this part of the way just isn't really going to be effective overall for your whole student body.
Right. Well, it's interesting you say another Jesuit university, you know, in terms of the BCBA program, there's a man who just started a BCBA program at Scranton and really wanted to collaborate with us. So even almost having a Jesuit BCBA collaborative, I mean, it's sort of interesting, but I think sometimes too, being able to connect with other places, use resources. I think what we're trying to do here is, you know, I think we have a very conservative sense, you know, we're not trying to hire 75, 10 new employees here. We sort of know we want to do these things in a very cost-effective manner. And there's ways to, you know, again, teach a class with Scranton or have a shared class, or again, some of the BCBA stuff really translates really lovely to some of the, you know, the work in HR or in marketing in the business school. So we're trying to be really deliberate. In this program really is a cost-effective yet very great return on investment, in addition to meeting a need that's extremely valuable and needed in the community. So it's just, you know, felt like a really good way to begin this process.
Good work, you guys.
It's fun work.
I would just, as parents of young child that's been on the spectrum, certainly understand this world of BCBA demand, and you know, would verify what Richard was saying and the shortcomings they are with finding enough. When I think about that, the person who wants to go into this program, they're paying John Carroll kind of tuition, kind of, you know, what's that profile look like? Is it like a student that would go to a John Carroll, or any thing you can clarify on that front?
Sure. Well, for me, I can say, I mean, Tom can talk. One thing that happens, so even with my interns, like I say, they are getting paid to go, right? And so the other thing that we would do, I mean, certainly what I've seen in the past, you know, I've been teaching here since 2008. And I've really ramped up students doing clinical experiences, and I've seen them go elsewhere. And so they are going, you know, after a John Carroll education, going to different places for the BCBA. But I also think how it would work would be, it would be flexible or evening hours, and they would work during the day, but it's also paid. So it's sort of working, but then again, when they're finished, you know, the pay is going to be more as you go through each gradation of the BCBA process, they get paid a lot more. Again, a pretty guaranteed job at the end, at least for the foreseeable future. And again, pretty competitive pay. So I see what you're, you know.
Yeah, Jim, I would just add to Tracy that differentiator in our BCBA program is going to be the availability of internships to get their hours quickly so that they can get the certification and licensure. That's the differentiator. That's the reason why we're going to be successful, because students that go into these programs are very, very attuned to this issue, because they can do an online program, and it might even be a little bit cheaper than John Carroll's program, but they aren't going to have an internship. They're going to find an internship, then they're going to have to pay for an internship. And so whatever amount of money they saved on tuition, they're going to lose 10 times over on paying for a supervisor. So that's really the advantage we have in terms of the BCBA program. In terms of the Autism Student Support Program, the major advantage that we have there, well, I wouldn't call it an advantage, I guess, we're seeing a major uptick in the number of students that want these kinds of services nationally. And that's, you know, starting to hit John Carroll. If you talk to folks in student support services, they'll tell you, like, no, we've seen a huge uptick even through COVID with these students. And so what we're really doing with this program is going to offer a program, like I said, that provides sort of best practices in all these areas, with the hope being that there's families, and I know some of these families that go around the country looking for the best program. And they say, you know, and they know what they're looking for, right? They're very educated. And so if we can, you know, be very clear on our website, be very clear in our materials, these are the kinds of supports we offer, and this is how it differentiates us from other programs, then I think it's very likely that we'll be able to recruit people, not just locally, but regionally and probably even nationally, because now I know I have a good friend in Chicago whose son is looking at these programs right now, and they're going all over the country. They're looking all over the country. They were just at Clemson looking at their program. So this is something that we can do, and if we do it well, we can attract students from a wide geographic region.
Jim, I think I can second that, because back in the dark ages, like with Rick, I graduated in 78. I rode my bike over to Notre Dame College so I could get the special ed classes. Had there been something like this, I probably would have gone in this, probably would have made it a career as opposed to doing IT. I ended up managing a number of people that were probably on the spectrum someplace, and it would have been a world of help had they been able to get something earlier in their lives.
Mm-hmm. And the number of students you envision is like 30 a year that would, and is that a 12-month program, an 18-month program?
It's a 2-year program. It's a 2-year program, and the student census, we're saying a minimum of 30, but we'll probably have an online component to the program too, so it'll be easier to raise the census up. But you know, we're just conservatively estimating 30 to be, you know, to get to that in the first few cohorts.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a very expandable program. I mean, Florida Institute of Technology has a mostly online program. They have like 200 students plus in their online program. It's probably more than that now, actually. I probably have old numbers on that. So it's very expandable, but the key for us is, you know, students want that internship. That's what matters to them. So if we can get them that internship, that's how we'll get the students in our program.
Mm-hmm.
I also recognize we need to do some marketing. It's not something that even within our department in psych, I think we have to be very cognizant of really educating, marketing. I mean, I think those of us that are in this field know it, but I think also to attract people and have students that, again, like I have, you know, probably 50 students I can think of that are in this field now over these years who do this stuff, who could speak to, again, the depth and I think the satisfaction that comes with this career and so forth. But I do think there's a component that we need to educate, market, explain, because I don't think even families understand it all the time, what it is. So I think I'm very aware of that. And we want to do a great job of recruiting students under, you know, helping them to sort of understand and see the amazing career that it is. Oh, I think you're muted.
I would agree with that, Tracy. First, I want to vouch for that. She has sent, we have 2 young adults with disabilities, and the students she sends over are just unbelievably, they're just great kids, just like she said. And that's inspired me to want to help and support Tom and Tracy's work. But I think that chart that Tom showed about the gap of need and providers is real. I do think that we need to think about the whole career path, getting to people early, high school, and letting them see what this looks like. Sometimes they land at John Carroll, they're inspired by your class, but there's a huge field that you've already spelled out in your presentation. We just all need to do a better job of educating and showing what a wonderful career path and the kinds of how they can make a difference and make a living, you know, and that John Carroll be the pathway to that. So keep up the good work. Let us know how we can support you.
Thank you so much.
There.
Very compelling. Well put together on the BCBA side for sure. And the work you're doing in the research is amazing.
Thanks, Jim.
I just wanted to say, also, this is Gretchen Walsh. I just wanted to say, I support the idea totally. I think it's a great idea. I know there's a huge need for it, and I love the BCBA component. So, you know, thank you for putting everything together. It's a great idea. Totally support it. There's a huge need.
Thanks, Gretchen.
Right, and I think Tom and I too, just to add a little bit more, I mean, while it's not that we're like limiting and we don't want to work with little kids. I mean, this is again, a big part of Tom's research, but I think Tom and I, alongside, Leslie and Ara, who we know really well, and we also have an emphasis on adults. That's an area that has extensive need, and we just have not met that need, anywhere near meeting that need in the field. And again, I know like Leslie and Ara are, creating some, housing issues, housing communities for individuals on the spectrum. I work closely with a lot of vocational and job coaching opportunities. So we are and again, being in a college situation where we work a lot with young adults with autism and other things, right? We're very, despite me being a child psychologist, I'm very, I see that adults and young adults and the lifespan of this, group of individuals is exceptionally important. So, and I think that's an unmet need. So. That's my 2 cents.
Any more questions or comments? Okay, so we are very excited about this program. I appreciate you taking the time to join us today. You obviously have an interest in this, otherwise you wouldn't have taken time out of your day to Zoom in on a John Carroll Zoom call at 4:30 in the afternoon on the East Coast. And we just invite you to tell your friends if you're passionate about it and you're in this space. We're looking for people to help us launch some of this stuff quickly, both through philanthropic investments and gifts, and also partnerships. So spread the word if you are in this space with other people, because the more people that know that we're going to offer this, because we're committed to doing it, the more people that know, the quicker we will be able to get this online and be able to invite students into the curriculum. Because I think Tom and Tracy, you'd like to be able to offer this program next fall. Is that right? Am I remembering the timeline right? So that's a pretty aggressive timeline. And we don't need all the money all at once, but we need a few more partners and a little bit of investment to get this started. Am I summarizing that correctly?
Absolutely.
Hey, Doreen, it would be helpful if you could send along the PowerPoint.
Yes, we recorded this, so we absolutely can send it. And there were quite a few people that connected in late. So we can send out a copy of this recording and we can send the PowerPoint separately if you want it, so that you can share it with some of your friends.
Absolutely. Yeah, and we're here, for me, I'm here, a lot of families like ours will reach out. The students are amazing. If you ever, have a need, this is what we do. This is what I love to do. So if you're local, especially, it's easier if you live close to have some students, but I teach an autism class every spring and the students need and love the experiences. So, let me know. Now you have my contacts, or it's Team Masterson at JCU. So happy to help out in any way in that capacity as well.
Yeah, same here. Thanks, Tracy. Thank you everybody for being here. Really appreciate it.